We talk about D-Hop and how great he is today. Where does D-Hop rank among the all-time receivers of the 2010s? Because to me, I want to rank that era. It's where I got into football the most. Let's rank the top wide receivers of the 2010s. Number one to me, between Antonio and Julio, it's got to be AB. AB, one of the best catch radiuses I've seen for a 5'10" receiver, but probably the best route runner in the league. Elite hands, unbelievable after the catch because he was a kick returner. He was dynamic. He was deceptive. I just don't think in that time there was a more well-rounded receiver in the league.
So you're giving your number one spot to AB?
Unquestionably.
Unquestionably. I mean, it's tough because there are guys like Larry and Calvin whose primes kind of intersected with the 2000s and 2010s, even though Calvin had his best years in the 2010s. For totality, I guess, Julio would be
he's got to be number two.
Yeah, but then where? It's so interesting with Calvin. So in these lists, do you rank Calvin in the top five or top five in the 2000s, or because he's got to be on one of these lists? If he's a top 10 wide receiver of all time, he's got to be on one of the lists. And I don't think you can make a case for the 2000s. So I think you'd have to make the case he's in the 2010s. And if that's the case, this guy's a top 10 wide receiver of all time.
Right. It's an issue because Calvin retired in 2015. Right.
Yeah, and he played 5
up
years.
Until that point, he had 6 straight 1,000-yard he had 6 straight 1,000-yard receiving seasons. But you also got to keep in mind too, while it's not totally fair, he only played in 2 playoff games during that time. Right.
I get you that. I get that, but we don't talk playoff games and playoff success when it comes to anybody besides quarterbacks. That's why I always say winning is a quarterback stat. We don't bring up you can't hold winning against a wide receiver. Their job is very limited to being thrown the football. So I never bring up winning. It's a plus. It's a plus, yes, but not something I would majorly contribute to a wide receiver.
Okay, so
I'm having trouble, man, because these goddamn intersectors. 2010. I'll go Julio.
I think it's a safe pick. Drafted in 2011. He played his entire prime in the 2010s.
Yeah.
Number 3 to me is where it gets tricky.
You got, we still have, Calvin if we want to throw in there. We got Larry.
And we've got D-Hop.
D-Hop, Devontae if you want to throw him in there.
Right. He was drafted in 2014, though, and he didn't really take off until 2018, 2019.
Tyreek
was drafted in 2016, so I don't think they would be. I think they're going to be 2020s.
AJ Green?
AJ Green's definitely one of them. Yeah.
Mike Evans, underrated.
Yes, consistency. Demaryius Thomas.
DT.
Rest in peace, man.
Jules. I got to throw Jules' name in there, John, just because if you want to talk playoff success, you want to talk clutch.
Right.
I think it starts in 2010s with Julian Edelman, if I got to be completely honest with you. It's the goddamn intersectors of this. I know people love doing it, but the intersectors that screw you here because you're like, damn, I'm leaving Calvin and Larry Fitzgerald off the list. But and then you mentioned the guys that were in drafted 2015, 2016. It's like
another great intersector is Andre Johnson, who had a couple of great years. Brandon Marshall is another one.
Yeah, well, we said the same name. Deshaun Jackson.
I think you're making it harder, though, and I am too. I think the right pick here, it's got to be D-Hop.
D-Hop.
I want to pull up his stats real quick so we can make the more compelling case. But D-Hop, he didn't have a quarterback up until 2018, and even then, he only got to play with Deshaun Watson for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
He goes to the Cardinals in 2020, which was technically 2019. Keep that in mind, right? His first year in Houston was 2019, the fall of
first year in Carolina. No, you mean Arizona, sorry.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. His first year in Arizona, where they made the playoffs. No, wait. They went 8-8 his first year, so I'm wrong. Okay, never mind. But DeAndre Hopkins in Houston, from 2013 to 2019, had himself five years with 1,000 yards, led the NFL in touchdowns one singular time. I just think he could have been so much better if he had a Deshaun Watson earlier, and he was still a 1,200-yard guy with likes of Tom Savage, Brock Osweiler,
TJ Yates, I think.
TJ Yates. This was post Matt Schaub, so
a bunch of
Ryan Mallett might have been in there too. I mean, some real pedestrian quarterback play.
Yeah, Brock Osweiler.
Number 4.
But yeah, I like your pick of D Hop being 3.
Larry Fitzgerald also had 5 1,000-yard receiving seasons in the 2010s, retired in 2020.
Larry Fitzgerald is such an underrated receiver, dude. It's not even funny. It really isn't. Congratulations. So from 2010, yeah, Larry. Yeah, I guess you would have to probably put Larry in the 2000s argument, not the 2010s, because his best years were in the 2010s. I think maybe is this where Calvin goes? Calvin's next, or
Yes.
AJ Green? Calvin or
I would
AJ?
put Calvin ahead of Larry Fitzgerald because he was a slightly better receiver. At his peak, he was the number 1 receiver in the NFL, and I think this is where, look, he did retire in 2016.
Yeah,
but he could have continued playing. I mean, his last year in the NFL, he had 1,000 yards still.
Yeah, his impact is unmeasurable.
Was he even 30 years old when he retired, man?
Yeah, I think he was
just
30 years old.
And he had 1,200 yards in his last season. So number 5 would then be Larry Fitzgerald for me. 6.
Larry, really?
Yeah, 6 for me would be AJ Green. I mean, the days with Andy Dalton and AJ were a high note before. I mean, before there was Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. There's AJ Green.
I love AJ Green.
Same draft class. AJ at his peak, 5 straight 1,000-yard receiving seasons. He had a 6 in 2017, but then the ankle injury let him go in Arizona. I think AJ Green at his peak is one of the more under-celebrated receivers because he was playing a small market. But
he made Andy Dalton. He made people look at Andy Dalton like Andy Dalton was a above average quarterback,
a fringe top 10 guy.
Yeah, and he was, well, I don't know about that, but he was never that. AJ Green carried his ass through that. So, yeah, I loved AJ Green when he was coming out of college. The guy could jump out the freaking gym. He even loved juggling. I remember that story about AJ Green. He was a juggler. That's why his hands were so great. But
right,
yeah.
And you want to know what's kind of crazy? So the next name that would come up to me is Des Bryant. But when you look at peak Des, and this is really unfortunate, it's crazy to think he only had 3 1,000-yard receiving seasons.
Yeah.
In 2015, he only played 9 games. And then from that point on, at just the age of 27 years old, we'd already seen the best version of him. And so I think because of the lack of longevity, AJ Green is more deserving.
Yeah, no, longevity, 100%.
So I also think Demaryius Thomas, who had with Peyton Manning 5 straight 1,000-yard receiving seasons, he would be above Des too at number 7. And then I would have Deshaun Jackson at 8. Is that crazy to have him above Des Bryant? Because at his peak, Des was the better receiver than Deshaun.
I think you're
but Deshaun's peak, keep that in mind, that was in 2013 Philly. He goes to Washington, and by 2016, he was no longer a top 10 guy at the position. So I think those two guys would be 7 and 8, or 8 and 9.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think Devontae Adams' name needs to be thrown in there. I think Mike Evans definitely needs to be thrown in there.
Right.
I know they were.
We've disrespected Mike for a while now.
What happened?
We've disrespected Mike for a while because
Mike. I thought you were talking about
he's the most consistent player in this group.
I
think actually, come to think about it, I forgot Mike Evans' name. I think he goes right after AJ Green. I think he goes ahead of Demaryius Thomas at number 7.
Because he came out the gates like consistent, like you said. Consistency is what you would describe Mike Evans as. This guy has never had less than 1,000 yards receiving his entire career. So he's going to break records if he can, him and Baker Mayfield can find some chemistry and do it again.
I mean, the poor guys' quarterbacks were Josh McCown, great analyst though, Mike Lennon, Jameis Winston. So when we talk about DeAndre Hopkins' lack of quarterbacks in Houston, I think that the best example would far and away be Mike Evans up until he got Tom Brady in 2020, right at the end of the decade. So our top 10 receivers of the 2010s. Number 1, Antonio Brown. I think Julio's got a great case, but the touchdown production wasn't there as much. I don't think he was as complete a player in the open as AB. But number 2 has to go to Julio. Number 3 for us, it's going to be one of the most underappreciated receivers the last millennium, and DeAndre Hopkins. Number 4, Calvin Johnson, the best in the game at his peak, but ultimately retired early. Number five was Larry Fitzgerald. Shout out to the Pitt legend. Number 6, AJ Green. Number 7, he's underrated as well, Mike Evans. Number 8, Demaryius Thomas. Shout out to him, rest in peace, legend. Number 9, I think we forgot Julian Edelman in here, didn't we?
Well, you did. Yeah, I just thought about that. To be honest with you, I would take Julian Edelman over Demaryius Thomas. That might be my Pats fan talking, and I'm fully aware of me saying that, but
it definitely is. I mean, to be fair to Julian, Super Bowl MVP. So that's something most of the guys on this list do not have.
Yeah, you don't. You can't look at. Sorry to interrupt, but you can't look at Julian Edelman's regular season. You have to look at his playoff numbers, and his playoff numbers are up there with Jerry frickin' Rice. That's legendary shit. If you want to talk legendary stuff, so
right. I just think I'm going to deduct some points because he played his entire career with Tom Brady, minus ebbs and flows of certain seasons in there. But number 9 to me, I'm still having a hard time. Andre Johnson, I think, is the last name that comes to mind because
Devontae? No, he came on late. He came on late. I see what you're saying. Yeah. I'm looking at his numbers now. He'll be in the conversation for, I mean, if he keeps it going, he might
be number 1 in the 2020s, but in 2010
he might get screwed over because of his age now if he starts to fall off.
Right. He is another 20er, man. He got to be drafted in 2009, 2011, 2010.
What about I'm looking up his numbers right now. Hold on. Brandon Marshall. When did he get 06? He's underrated as hell.
Speaking of bad quarterback play.
So 1,000 yards with Miami in 2010, 1,200 in 2011 with Miami, 1,500 with Chicago in 2012, 1,300 basically in 2013 with Chicago. Down, he misses 3 years to 721. Gets traded to the Jets as 1,500 yards with the Jets in 2015 with Ryan Fitzpatrick and a career high of 14 touchdowns. Then he falls off a cliff. So that would be a hard one to make the case. But I think when we get to these guys that we're talking about right now at 9, 10, this is where some guys are gonna have that little fall off in there. That's why I think I don't know. I do think Julian Edelman has to be at least in the top 10. I
agree. Oh, yeah. I don't agree, but I see where you're coming from. So number 9 for me, right after Demaryius, would be our man, Brandon Marshall, who probably should not have made that bet with Antonio Brown. They just have more receiving yards because that didn't work out too well for him. And then number 10, last but not least, would be Dez Bryant. Fantastic at his peak, but it just was not long enough, I think, relative to the rest of these guys that did it for at least 5 or 6 years. Your adjustment would be Julian Edelman number 7.
Yeah, Julian Edelman has to be in my list, yeah.
Okay.
I like the guys. You can mix them. I think the top 3 are kind of set in stone. Maybe the top 5 are, but after that, you can, mix and match wherever you really, fall towards.